In 1892, Anna Julia Cooper said, "Education for the human soul gives power and the right direction to the intellect, the sensibilities, and the will." In 2014, Django Paris and Sami Alim said, "We move away from the pervasiveness of pedagogies that are too closely aligned with linguistic, literate, and cultural hegemony, and toward developing a pedagogical agenda that does not concern itself with the seemingly pantopic white gaze that permeates educational research and practice with and for students of color, their teachers, and their schools." The words of educator activist Anna Julia Cooper and Django Paris and Sami Alim, more than a century apart, indicate the urgent need for justice in educational spaces. This book shares the stories of early literacy teachers and teacher educators who honor children and their families and communities and recognize that urgent need for pedagogical change. Guided by educators like Anna Julia Cooper, in this book we focused on education for the human soul as we set out to develop culturally relevant practices in our classrooms, and through the writing of this book, began to ask questions posed by Paris and Alim, like how can our pedagogies be culturally sustaining, and what is it that we seek to sustain? Years ago, Gloria Ladson-Billings entreated teachers to anchor their instruction in what she termed culturally relevant teaching. She offered that great teaching should be asset-based, but going further than that, it should develop students' competence in their own and at least another culture, critical consciences about injustices in their worlds, and academic achievement. Later, admiring Paris's conceptualization of culturally sustaining pedagogies, Ladson-Billings wrote that culturally sustaining pedagogy picked up culturally relevant teaching where the beat dropped.
The ideas expressed in this book are like a cipher. A cipher is a culturally sustaining practice that has been used by young people throughout time, and particularly known to be used in hip-hop through dance, rapping, rhyming, emceeing, and dialogue. This particular idea of the cipher and expressing yourself in the cipher, sharing in the cipher, was widely influenced by the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths, who have been known historically to share in this fashion, building, adding on. And this particular idea of a cipher has been historically used throughout the lineage of Africans and indigenous people throughout time.
Hi, my name is Patricia Piña, and at this moment I have no words to express how I feel after getting this book. I would like to thank Miss Kindel for allowing me to tell a little bit of my story and to be part as a family with my classroom and my co-teacher, Miss Teresa. I also want to say that I don't have enough words to thank you, never in the world, to say the awesome job that you guys are doing, putting a message that we need more, let's put it this way, a little more diversity in our classroom. That way children can identify themselves with their teachers. And one day we don't have labels, like I have to put labels of my chairs and saying silla, chair, or blocks, bloques. Also, I wanted to say that I would like to give more of me, but I need to take a little time off to think through what was going on with my thoughts. And I also want to say thank you, Alice Central Academy for Children, for giving me the opportunity and work for them and give a little bit of myself to those little people that are going to be our future. Thank you, and keep doing what you're doing, because we need more, way more. And thank you again.
Hi, I'm Julia Lopez Robertson of the University of South Carolina, and I'm also Major Haney's Diet Partner. One of the prominent features of culturally sustaining pedagogy is that instruction, the materials that we use in our schools, are directly connected to the children and the families and their language, their culture, their ways of being, and their ways of knowing. In our case, for our Spanish-speaking Latino families, who were mostly from Mexico and self-identified as Mexican or Mexican American, the books that we chose reflected those cultures and those languages. The families engaged with us in conversations that were very deep and where they shared their aspirations for their children. They also shared their concerns and their worries. And they were able to do these things with us because of the mutual trust that we had through our relationship. One of the insights from our work together, or many of the insights from our work together, that the work was built upon, as I said, trust, a respect for the relationship, patience and time, and lots of love. So because the work was so transformational that we engaged in with our families, without trust, it wouldn't have been possible to get that work done. And it wouldn't have been possible for the radical pedagogical structures to emerge in the work that we did with them. The relationships. None of the work that we did would have been possible without having a trusted relationship with our families or with each other as a dyad. So we knew that throughout the few years that we worked together on this project, we were both going to grow and grow in different ways. And that was okay, because whatever way that we grew all helped us with the work that we did with our families. And the trust with our families took a long time to establish, as the next time's patience and time. We cannot expect families to tell us what their true aspirations are, their true worries, their true concerns. We can't expect that to happen overnight. They have to know that what we do is doing it with them, not for them. We're not here to learn how to do things in one certain way. We're not there to teach them how to do anything. We are the ones that were learning from our families. And together we established a trusting relationship that helped us help them understand the American public school and help them understand how to work better for their children. And at the end of the day, everything that we did was built on love. Everything in Horror Hill was built on love. And it's not the romantic love, but it's having that love, the relationship, the trusting relationship, where we grow to see all of the riches that the families bring as things to grow from, to look at them as assets, not as deficits. And our closing thought would be that we believe that when schools are grounded in the richness of the students' heritage, culture, language, and of the families, they transform these learning environments from places that work for some students to a real extension of the community as a whole, and one that pulls all children, all students, all families forward. Thank you for your time.
I was born and raised in Queens, New York. I was part of a very close-knit Latinx family. My mother came from Paraguay, South America. My father is Mexican American. So through my childhood, my aunts came from South America, stayed with us, helped my mom and my dad, watched my sisters and I. So we were all very close. My sisters and I would share rooms so our aunts could have the second bedroom in our home. Family's always been important, community's always been important. I don't think I know anything other than family and community, because that's just how we were raised. So I'm wanting to instill that in my own children. And as I became a mother at a young age and became a single mother, I knew that education was important, a stable job was important, so returned to school after being in social work for a while to become a teacher. And it's something that my values of family and community have just radiated inside the classroom too. And I just, before coming to know the terms that connected with that, I was doing it, just didn't realize the pedagogies and all that that attached to those philosophies.
I was born and raised in Bay Shore, New York. That's in Long Island. And my parents, my dad, he was from Panama, and he immigrated from Panama, from Cologne, to actually be a jazz musician. And my mom, her family is from Ivor, Virginia, and she was born and raised in Pennsylvania, spent some time in Ohio, and most of her time in Brooklyn. Raised as a young boy in Bay Shore, I was energetic. I loved to dance, and my parents put me into dance school. And during my early years in early childhood education, I was deemed as a behavior problem. So one of the things that was very paramount in my experience was that my dance teacher came to my school and worked with my classroom teachers along with my phys ed teacher to identify that I was a kinesthetic learner. And that's actually how I learned back then, before they had all these terms of ADHD or executive functioning issues. But I had a great opportunity to experience what culturally relevant pedagogy looked like, because my dance teacher actually guided my classroom teachers to support me. And then, so growing up, being able to actually get acclimated with this style of learning, I had a lot of success in my latter part of my elementary school years, into middle school, into high school. And so by the time I became an educator, this whole idea of culturally relevant, responsive, and even sustaining pedagogies was something that I felt very comfortable with because of my own background and upbringing. Our dyad partnership, Alicia, it involved, us being co-mentors. We really wanted to dispel this whole idea of the hierarchy. At the time I was the assistant principal here at Northern Parkway, and you as a classroom teacher, I supervised you. But one of the things that we were learning together was that, for this relationship and for us to learn even more, is that we would have to leave that traditional top-down relationship to the side and realize that we were really going to learn from each other.
I don't remember specifically. I just remember how you became part of the classroom. So it was almost like another teacher in the room, not an administrator. I think the students began to see that also. And when you're being formally observed, your feedback is you should do this, you should do that, and that wasn't happening. And it was more, well, what can we do together to have a different outcome if that's necessary, or what did you tell me what you did in order to get this outcome. So it really was a lot of what my students and I did, more than just what you could do to make the situation or their.
Alicia, let's talk about cultural responsiveness in action. Let's talk about the opening day writing project. I'm a baseball fan, and we know how big baseball is, particularly in New York, between this Met-Yankee dynamic. So, let's talk a little bit about that and how you incorporate that in the classroom.
So this started with the morning meeting conversation with my students, because my husband and I have this debate, because he's a Mets fan and I'm a Yankees fan. So we were having this debate within morning meeting, and it just blew up to the Mets are the best, no, the Yankees are the best. Well, my dad likes the Yankees, or my dad likes the Mets, and my family. So we had a lot of back and forth discussion. It was right during opening day, right before opening day of the baseball season in New York, and New York has those two major teams. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do a compare and contrast of the two and have the kids write about it. So it's very challenging to find reading materials and texts that are appropriate for second graders. So I developed my own text based on news articles, interviews, things like that. And I had a bunch of different things for the kids to choose from. So we did a compare and contrast of the two teams, a Venn diagram, and then the students chose which team was the best, and they had to convince their other classmates that their team was the best. So this project is probably my favorite, and I still do to this day. And every year it seems to grow. But it started with my students talking about skin color and how the darker you were bad. So I wanted the students to be able to see Afro-Latinos, and we came across Celia Cruz. I came across the book, My Name is Celia, Me llamo Celia, by Monica Brown. So I read that book to students just to show them with not really an intention of doing anything more than that. And it just sparked so many conversations. They wanted to learn about her music. They wanted to learn about Cuba. They wanted to learn about her family. They wanted to read more about her. They wanted to listen to her music. So we did. We spent time listening to her music. We spent time learning about Cuba. We learned about the people who lived in Cuba. We learned about the racism in Cuba. We learned about so much, all because of this one conversation that we were having. And then Monica Brown also wrote El Rey de Mambo, Tito Puente. So we read Tito Puente, and then the kids they were on this compare and contrast kick where they wanted to compare everything. So we compared them, and they started connecting with all the singers now. So they connected with Jennifer Lopez, with Daddy Yankee, with Romeo Santos, like all these different artists that they know from home. And the families really got involved with allowing the students to be more purposeful in the children listening to music. So I think that gave families and students more meaningful musical choices, like they really were intentional in what they were doing and who they were listening to and why they were listening to them. So it became something even bigger than what it started out as. Celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month has always been really important to me because I didn't have that opportunity going to school. And I think when I started, I was really just focusing on highlighting countries and the language and the typical flags and food. But as I learned more, I wanted to do something different. So that's why we did the artifact museum with the children, and the whole school became involved. So the following year, to connect with that, I found this book, Si Somos Latinos, by Alma Flor Ada. And it talks about all different kinds of Latinos that there are. And I wanted the students to recreate that book, so have our own Si Somos Latinos book. I really wanted for them to understand how important their language was, how important their community was, because we were living in a time where they were hearing all over that it really wasn't important. So I wanted them to really understand how important their family and their culture and their heritage was. So we created a page in the book of Si Somos Latinos. So they wrote Me llamo, their name, and then soy de, so they were, for me I put soy de herencia paraguaya y mexicana. And something that I loved about myself or about my family, and then we ended with Si Soy Latina. And they each created that with a picture, and we created our own book. I mean, the book was what we say Fontainebleau level U, which is what, 5th or 6th grade?
Yeah.
And second graders, they really enjoyed it. I read it aloud to them in English and in Spanish, and they really connected with it. The families really loved that activity.
Hello, my name is Crystal Glover, and I am an associate professor of early childhood education at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Everyone, my name is Chinri Harris, and I am a doctoral student at Teachers College, Columbia University.
And we'd like to take just a few minutes to talk to you about our chapter in the book. Our chapter is chapter 5. One of the things that stood out to both of us as we started on this journey together was the relationship that we had as a dyad. We were really fortunate when we began this journey to have a pre-existing relationship outside of this. We had worked on research together in the past, and when we met, we were actually both graduate students. And so we really feel like that starting our dyad relationship that way helped us begin a relationship that was built on mutual respect and understanding. We didn't really have any challenges associated with the hierarchy of a university teacher educator coming into a classroom. One of the things I really appreciated, Chinnery, was how you always made me feel like the classroom was ours. You always called it our classroom and our students. And from the moment I walked in, I just always felt welcome. And this, you modeled that for the students. And as you know, they just saw me as a second teacher in the classroom. So I really appreciated that. What were your thoughts about the dyad relationship?
Well, I think I first of all I agree with you. I think that having our prior relationship meant that we already had an understanding of how we work together, so we were able to collaborate in a way that was productive, um, and really honoring each other's knowledge. And I appreciate how when when we engage with each other and writing curriculum or interacting with students, we were partners. Um, and you valued my knowledge, which is meaningful. I think when you are a first year teacher, you have so many people who are questioning that, and then they have someone um, who was the in traditional by all traditional accounts considered the teacher educator, um, to validate your knowledge is really meaningful and beneficial. And I think our collaboration was a great model for students because they saw um, educators working together. They saw two women of color working together, and they saw themselves working together with us to create this community of knowledge and understanding and thinking. So, this diverse community of knowledge and understanding and thinking. So,
I absolutely agree. And to hear you talk about this idea of community really makes me think about another thing that I think was prevalent throughout this experience, and that was this idea of classroom community. Not just within the community, but that also extended to the families. We did a
mhm.
lot. We emphasized the importance of family involvement, and I think the children felt that. I know I felt that from the moment I walked into the classroom. Parents were welcome and they knew that and they came in, and you did such a great job of making them a part of the curriculum, really. So there were so many memorable moments that I have associated with that. What were some of your favorite as far as families as curriculum?
Hmm. Families as curriculum. I would say, wow, there like you, there are so many different parts of it. I think there seemed to be a blurring of classroom and home. Um, I know for me, I lived in the neighborhood with a lot of my students. So, I mean, I've gone to dinner at I went to dinner at one student's house, or we would walk to the campus, the university together, um, or just stepping outside and having someone run by and say, "Hi, Miss Harris." um, but also, like you said, there was this open door presence, where parents could come in at any time, and um, I think we saw a part of that in the culture quilts, where we saw how parents and families were formed, or when students interviewed each other for the morning news, the cultural enthusiasts. So yeah, I that was my favorite part. Um, is there anything that stands out specifically that you can
It's so hard
similar to?
to pick one thing, and I think so much of what we did blended across these areas. You think about families, you think about community, I think about student autonomy, and in all of these experiences or the examples that some that we shared in the book, and some we just didn't have the space because there were just so many. But I mean, I think about in terms of student autonomy, I think about how how much you leveraged the children's interests and their ability to make smart choices for themselves. We had some challenges associated with behaviors and classroom management, but I think you were just really seamless in giving the children that autonomy in terms of things as easy as, them picking the topic for an assignment, or they wrote lesson plans and they got to be the teacher, if you will. And I think a lot of that falls back on, like you were talking earlier, about how we modeled that we were learners, and we got to be learners when they taught their lessons. There were just so many opportunities. I think the lesson plans really stand out to me. Those opportunities that the children got to be experts in whatever, if it was Spider-Man or if it was a video game, and they were so proud of what they did. And y'all know how much you have to understand a topic in order to present that or relay that to your peers. And they really worked hard to do that. And that stands out to me. I also think a lot about the classroom management. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and some of the autonomy that you gave students as it relates to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a part of, I think sometimes people think of children as these sort of objects that they can move around and control. And I think people forget that children have thoughts, they have needs, and they have wants too. And I recall I had a student who, by all accounts, was extremely bright, genius. I mean, he very knowledgeable student, but he did have some challenges, making good choices. So for him, he had an option of 3 different seating spaces to do his work. And so, if he wanted to work with a group, he had a group spot. If he wanted to work by himself at a desk, but still within arm's reach of the group, he had a desk. And if he wanted to completely be if he needed to be completely away, he could choose to do that as well. And even then, I can recall one time he chose to sit at one of our conversation tables, and I still recall him from the back of the classroom, um, explaining something to the class, and then someone in the class engaging with him, and it was like this really cool, seamless interaction, and the community that I guess the collaboration that we modeled, and um, just the community enabled the children in the classroom to think everybody gets what they need. They all receive what it is that they need, and this is what he needed. So there was never an issue with that. There was never really any question about why does he have this additional accommodation. Everyone was just like, okay, tomorrow I might need something. So I think choice. Yeah, I think that was good for him and for all of us.
Absolutely. And there are just so many other examples that we could share, but I know our time is limited. So any closing thoughts?
I would just say, I think the PD, when I think about when I started with the PDCRT, that was my I was a first year teacher. And as I gone through my studies now, as from a novice teacher to a less novice teacher, to a doctoral student, to a teacher educator right now, for me, I think about what an effect, that positive effect, the PDC and working with you definitely had. And I just wonder where would I be in terms of my perspective and the lenses that I see teaching through if I didn't have that support. So
I do. I really understand that. And I think about your growth and just how much I've seen you flourish from that moment. I feel exactly the same way. When I started, it was my first year as an assistant professor, and I recently got hired, and I've been reflecting on that experience and writing, my dossier for promotion. And I don't know where I would be without PDCRT. It just had such an influence. It was just this thread throughout everything that I've done from that moment to this moment. So it's been such a pleasure to work with you and to learn and to grow. And I know we'll continue to do that and grow together. So thanks.
exactly. Thank you.
My name is Dinah Volk, and I'm a retired professor of early childhood education at Cleveland State University. Building on the work of Erin Miller and Susie Long, I worked with a collaborative group developing PDCRT, and I was a board member through the first 3 cohorts.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Miller. I'm an associate professor at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I was one of the founding members of the PDCRT along with Dr. Susie Long.
So Erin and I were co-authors of Chapter 6, the final chapter in the book. Culturally relevant pedagogies is the norm. Lessons learned, action steps, and questions to help us move toward culturally sustaining pedagogies. We wrote in our chapter first about some of the PDCRT goals that came out of the joint work of the cohorts. Those goals were to develop culturally relevant pedagogies in early childhood classrooms, create mutual mentorships and dismantle university school hierarchies, provide a support system for teachers getting started, prioritize diverse classrooms and teachers of color, and transform early childhood spaces into places for critical conversations. We also interviewed the dyads about the lessons they had learned. We want to share those with you. So the first lesson, nurture distinct practices in each classroom context. There is no formula. Because each classroom context was embedded in a specific context, and because of distinctions among teachers and children and families, the teaching and learning in each classroom were distinct. There was no formula. Lesson 2, address power differentials. Challenging and replacing the power differentials that were inherent in our roles and positionalities was hard, but it was central to the work of the PDCRT. Lesson 3, recognize that relationships are fundamental and they take time to build. It took time for trust to develop in order for the dyads to be able to collaborate and to venture into the necessary and difficult conversations. Lesson 4, as we've noted, engage with children around complex issues. What we found is that children of every age in every dyad demonstrated the capacity to engage, to ask questions, to think deeply and empathically without trivializing complex issues. And that was when they were given the opportunity and encouragement and support to do so.
Lesson 5 was to center teachers, children, and families of color, to decenter whiteness. As we write, the dyad work described in this book was led by educators who centered their teaching on the languages, cultures, and histories of their students and their families, countering deficit perspectives typically engendered by the white gaze and rejecting many of the developmental norms and constraints established by the early childhood literature. Lesson 6, teach literacy as a social and cultural practice. Each dyad effectively grounded their work in an understanding of literacy as a social and cultural practice of meaning making, and by valuing and forefronting the languages and cultural practices of the children, families, and communities. Lesson 7 was learn from families. Foundational to this work was a belief in families informing curriculum and coming into the classroom not just to help teachers, but to teach children and for teachers to learn from them. Lesson 8 was to study and together and to develop a critical perspective. Collaborative discussions of the readings that both challenged the thinking of both teachers and teacher educators leveled the field and contributed to the development of mutual mentorships. Finally, lesson 9, develop equitable assessments. In all 4 settings, the dyads worked against the oppressive power of standardized, high-stakes, official, biased assessments to counter damage, at least for that school year, that traditional assessments inflict on children and families by failing to provide a true picture of children's literacy abilities. In the last part of the chapter, we asked some final questions for consideration for your own practice. For example, we asked, how can our pedagogies be culturally sustaining? And what is it that we seek to sustain? What changes are required institutionally? And what are the drawbacks of institutionalization? Can one teacher's practice lead to sustaining culture and language in the life of a child, in the life of a school, in the life of a community? And in what specific ways am I or is my school perpetuating and fostering what Paris and Alim call linguistic literacy and cultural pluralism as a part of schooling for positive social transformation and revitalization? Recognizing for this to truly be a part of schooling, it must be seen and enacted as foundational, daily, and the norm. We also considered a question that guided this project to begin with, a question posed by one of our PDCRT members, Carmen Tisdale, who asks us, if not me, then who? I guess we didn't talk about how to end it. I just used to say something like, you can find more about this work in chapter 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, when I didn't see myself, I just saw you.
At my school, Northern Parkway, we utilize this idea of a cipher of every morning having a morning meeting where our scholars come together with their teachers to check in on a daily basis. Crystal, she talks about utilizing a cipher where each semester she has her pre-service teachers coming together for check-ins just before their internships. And Kindel, she has this continual ritual where she has her teachers and colleagues do check-ins on each. And Kindel, along with her other university faculty and colleagues, they form a circle and they have this experience where they call Walk Their Story, where they talk about their own individual experiences and how that contributes to their pedagogy and work and research. We invite you, all the readers and our colleagues, to create your own spaces, form your own ciphers, create your own family trees. Hence is the reason why we have a blank one in this manuscript, so you could share and do your own. Because we know that there's going to be certain pieces that we may have missed, and we're looking forward to learning with you. So please add on to the cipher. Peace.